A cleaning woman covered a sleeping CEO with her sweater, thinking he looked too tired to be alone. What she didn't know, he was a vampire king who'd been awake for 300 years. And she'd just spoken the exact words his dead wife once said. Darius Vale hadn't closed his eyes in 300 years. He didn't need to. Yet here he sat, slumped in his leather chair on the 45th floor of Vale Corp headquarters, pretending to be the most exhausted CEO in Manhattan. His breathing was carefully measured, slow, deep, human. His left hand dangled over the armrest, fingers loose. His head tilted just enough to suggest a man who'd finally surrendered to exhaustion after a brutal 16-hour board meeting. It was all theater. Through the thin veil of his eyelashes, Darius watched the polished glass door of his corner office. Outside, the city glittered like fallen stars, but his focus remained razor-sharp on one thing. Whoever walked through that door next would reveal their true nature. Thieves always do, he thought coldly. For 2 weeks, small items had gone missing from the executive floor.
A Montblanc.
A crystal paperweight. Last Friday, a vintage Rolex from the VP of Finance's desk drawer. His HR director, Marcus, insisted it was one of the night shift cleaning crew, but had no proof. Security footage showed nothing. The culprit knew where the cameras were. Darius could have simply turned everyone on staff and commanded the truth from their minds. But he'd sworn an oath centuries ago, no unnecessary compulsion. Humans deserved their free will, even when they abused it. Still, he was curious. After living through the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, 2 world wars, and the birth of the Internet, humanity continued to disappoint him in predictable ways.
Greed.
Betrayal. Violence. Maybe tonight will be different, a small voice whispered in the back of his mind, the same voice that had kept him from burning it all down decades ago. He ignored it. At 11:47 p.m., he heard the soft click of a keycard at the door. Darius's pulse, which he kept beating out of habit, not necessity, remained steady. His supernatural hearing picked up everything: the whisper of rubber-soled shoes on marble, the rustle of a cleaning cart, the quiet hitch of breath from someone who'd just noticed him. Oh, the voice was female, surprised. Gentle. He didn't move. Footsteps approached slowly, cautiously, then stopped about 6 feet away. Sir? The woman's voice was barely above a whisper. Mr. Vale? Darius maintained his act. The faint scent of lemon cleaner and something else, lavender soap, maybe, drifted toward him. Not perfume. This woman couldn't afford perfume. A pause. Then the footsteps retreated. Here it comes, Darius thought. She'll go for the platinum cufflinks on my desk. Or the Mont Blanc in the pen holder. They always take something small first. But instead, he heard the soft swish of a duster moving across his bookshelf. The gentle clink of papers being straightened.
She was
cleaning. Darius resisted the urge to open his eyes fully. For the next 10 minutes, the woman moved through his office like a ghost. She emptied his trash bin, wiped down the windows, even repositioned a crooked painting on the wall, a Monet original he'd purchased in 1891 directly from the artist's studio. Not once did she approach his desk where $3,000 in cash sat visible in an open drawer. He'd left it there deliberately. Then something unexpected happened. The footsteps came closer. Darius felt a presence beside his chair, and his predatory instincts flared. Every muscle in his body coiled, ready to strike if she reached for his wallet. But she didn't. Instead, something warm and soft draped over his shoulders. A cardigan. Old, worn, smelling of laundry detergent and that same lavender soap. Darius's eyes nearly flew open in shock. In 3 centuries, no one had ever. No one deserves to be this tired. The words were barely a whisper, spoken so softly they might have been meant for herself. But they hit Darius like a stake through the heart. His wife had said those exact words. Margaret. His Margaret, with her ink-stained fingers and bright laugh, who used to find him in his study at dawn after he'd worked through the night on Kingdom correspondence. She would drape her shawl over his shoulders and whisper those words before kissing his temple. That was in 1825. She'd been dead for 200 years. The woman was walking away now, her cart squeaking softly toward the door. Darius sat frozen, his carefully controlled facade shattered. His hand gripped the armrest so hard the leather cracked beneath his fingers.
Impossible.
He forced himself to remain still until he heard the door close, the lock click, the footsteps fade down the hallway. Only then did Darius open his eyes. The cardigan on his shoulders was beige, threadbare at the elbows, with a small coffee stain near the hem. It was the kind of sweater someone wore because they couldn't afford to throw it away, not because they liked it. She'd given him the cardigan off her own back. Darius stood abruptly, the sweater falling to the floor. He moved to the window, his reflection barely visible in the glass. Pale skin, dark hair, eyes that burned crimson when his control slipped. No one deserves to be this tired. Those words. That exact phrase. A coincidence? He'd stopped believing in coincidences around the same time he'd stopped believing in God. Darius pulled out his phone and dialed Marcus. The HR director answered on the first ring, his voice groggy. Sir? It's almost midnight. The cleaning woman who just left my office. I need her file on my desk in 10 minutes. Everything. Full background check, employment history, family records. Everything. Which one? We have 6 on night shift. Brown hair, late 20s, moves quietly. She was wearing a beige cardigan. He paused. Actually, she's not wearing it anymore.
I'll
Find out who that is. Darius hung up and turned back to the cardigan on the floor. Slowly, he bent down and picked it up, running his fingers over the worn fabric. For the first time in centuries, the Vampire King felt something he'd forgotten existed.
hope.
And it terrified him more than any wooden stake ever could. Darius had watched the security footage 47 times. It was now 9:23 p.m. the following evening, and he sat in his darkened office, the glow of his computer screen casting shadows across his face. On the monitor, the grainy footage showed him, asleep in his chair, and then, at timestamp 23 hours 51 minutes and 33 seconds, she entered. Clara Thompson. That was her name. He pressed pause, zooming in on her face. Mid-20s, tired eyes, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore the same cleaning uniform all the night staff wore, but hers was faded from too many washes. Everything about her screamed ordinary. Except she wasn't. Darius pressed play and watched for the 48th time as Clara cleaned his office, then draped her cardigan over his shoulders. He'd enhanced the audio, isolated her voice, removed every other sound until only her whisper remained. No one deserves to be this tired. He'd run the audio through voice analysis software. No match in any database. He'd checked historical records, old recordings, anything connected to Margaret's family line. Nothing. Yet the words were exact. Not similar. Not close.
Exact.
The file Marcus had delivered sat open on his desk. Clara Marie Thompson, age 27. Widow. Her husband died 3 years ago in a construction accident. One son, Ethan, age 5. 2 jobs. Night janitor at Vale Corp. Weekend waitress at a diner in Queens. No criminal record. No debt beyond normal bills. No social media presence beyond a basic Facebook account she rarely updated. She was invisible. Forgettable. Perfect prey for the city. So, why had she given him her cardigan? A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts.
Come in.
Marcus entered, looking nervous. He always looked nervous around Darius, which was smart. Sir, you asked me to arrange another background check. I went deeper, talked to her references, previous employers, neighbors. And everyone says the same thing.
She's kind.
Keeps to herself. Works hard. One neighbor said Clara once paid for her groceries when her card declined. She didn't even know the woman. Darius leaned back in his chair. Financial status. Barely making rent. Behind on utilities. Her son's school sent 3 notices about unpaid lunch fees. Marcus hesitated. Sir, if this is about the thefts, I really don't think. It's not about the thefts. Marcus blinked. Then what? That will be all. After Marcus left, Darius pulled up a different file, one his assistant didn't know existed. He'd hacked into the building's environmental systems, accessing biometric data the sensors collected for climate control. Heart rate, body temperature, respiratory patterns. Last night, when Clara had entered his office and found him sleeping, her heart rate had been 72 beats per minute. Normal. When she'd approached him, a strange man alone, in a locked office at midnight, it had risen to 76. Only 76. When she draped the cardigan over him and whispered those words, her heart rate had actually dropped to 68. She'd been calmer near him than when she was alone. That wasn't normal. Humans had instincts. Prey animals always sensed predators. Even when Darius suppressed his aura completely, people felt something, a cold spot, a sense of unease, a primitive warning to run. But Clara Thompson had covered him with her cardigan like he was someone worth protecting. What are you? He wondered, staring at her frozen image on the screen. His phone buzzed. A text from building security. Night shift started. Cleaning crew clocked in. Darius stood, his decision made. If Clara Thompson had some connection to his past, supernatural or otherwise, he'd discover it. But he couldn't do it as Darius Vale, CEO. She'd be too guarded, too careful. He needed her to see him as harmless. 20 minutes later, Darius rode the service elevator down to the basement storage level, wearing clothes he'd borrowed from the maintenance supervisor's locker, dark blue coveralls, scuffed work boots, a cap pulled low. He'd altered his appearance slightly, made his skin tone warmer, his eyes brown instead of their natural pale gray, added the hint of a 5 o'clock shadow. 300 years of survival had taught him how to become anyone. The basement was dim, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes that hummed like dying insects. Rows of storage shelves stretched into shadow, packed with office supplies, old furniture, archived files. He heard her before he saw her, the squeak of cart wheels, the soft humming of a melody he didn't recognize. Darius grabbed a clipboard from a hook on the wall and pretended to check inventory as Clara rounded the corner, pulling her cleaning cart. She saw him and smiled. Actually smiled, like finding a stranger in a creepy basement at midnight was perfectly normal.
Are
you new? Her voice was lighter than he expected. Younger. There was a warmth to it that made something in his chest tighten, a feeling he hadn't experienced since Margaret used to greet him after his long trips away from home. Yeah, Darius said, deepening his voice slightly. First week. Derek, he'd seen the name on the coveralls.
I am Clara.
Welcome to the glamorous world of late-night building maintenance, she laughed, and it was genuine, unforced. Fair warning. The heating system down here sounds like it's haunted around 2 a.m. I'll keep that in mind. She moved past him toward the supply shelves, and Darius caught that scent again. Lavender soap and something underneath it. Something that made his instincts go quiet. Not silent. Just still. Like recognition. Clara reached for a box of trash bags on the top shelf, stretching on her toes. Without thinking, Darius stepped forward. Let me. His hand closed over hers on the box. The moment their skin touched, Darius felt it. A pulse of something that shot up his arm like electricity. Clara gasped softly and met his eyes. For one impossible second, her brown eyes flickered gold. Then she blinked, and they were normal again. Thanks, she whispered, taking the box. These shelves aren't built for short people. But Darius barely heard her. His mind was racing. Gold eyes. Margaret had gold eyes in sunlight. Clara was already walking away, humming again, completely unaware that she'd just confirmed his suspicion. She wasn't just connected to his past. She was his past. And she had no idea. So, how's your son handling the move? Darius regretted the question the moment it left his mouth. Too specific. He wasn't supposed to know she had a son. Not as Derek, the new maintenance guy. But Clara didn't seem to notice. She was wrestling with a box of archived files, trying to shift it from one shelf to another. I haven't told him yet. Don't want to get his hopes up until I have first and last month's rent saved. Must be tough. Raising a kid alone, Darius positioned himself on the other side of the box, gripping the edges. On three. Sure. They lifted together. The box was heavy enough that Clara grunted with effort, but Darius had to remember to pretend it weighed something. He'd carried grand pianos with one hand. Tough doesn't begin to cover it, Clara said once they'd settled the box on the lower shelf. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. But Ethan's worth it. He's 5, and he still believes the world is good. I want to keep it that way as long as possible. By moving. Our building. Clara trailed off, her smile fading. There was a shooting last week, 2 blocks away. Ethan heard the sirens and asked if the police were coming to help someone. Not if someone got hurt, if they were coming to help. She shook her head. That's the difference, you know? He still thinks help comes when you need it. Darius felt something twist in his chest. And you want him to keep thinking that. For as long as I can afford to. Yeah, Clara grabbed her spray bottle and started wiping down the shelves. There's a neighborhood in Queens, near the park, good school district. Rent's higher, but the landlord doesn't ignore broken locks. Kids play outside after dark. That's what I'm saving for. 2 jobs worth of saving. Clara glanced at him, and for a moment, Darius thought he'd pushed too far. But she just nodded. 2 jobs, extra shifts, skipped meals. Whatever it takes. She paused, then added quietly, my husband always said Ethan deserved to grow up safe. I'm just trying to keep that promise. Your husband. Darius had read about Daniel Thompson in the file. Construction worker. Killed when scaffolding collapsed. Age 29. Left behind a widow and a 2-year-old son. The life insurance barely covered the funeral. I'm sorry, Darius said, and meant it. Don't be. Thank you. But I'm tired of sorry. Clara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Everyone's been sorry, for 3 years. I need different things now. Like functioning plumbing and neighborhoods where gunshots aren't the local alarm clock. She moved to the next row of shelves, and Darius followed, drawn by something he couldn't name. The basement was cold, concrete and metal and fluorescent gloom, but wherever Clara went felt warmer. Not physically, his vampire senses didn't work that way. But there was a presence around her, like standing near a fireplace in winter. He'd felt this once before, centuries ago, when Margaret would read in his study while he worked. She never said much, just existed in his space, and somehow that made the darkness feel less heavy. Can I ask you something? Clara said, reaching for a higher shelf. Sure. Why maintenance? You seem, she gestured vaguely at him. I don't know. Too smart for this. Darius almost laughed. Maybe I'm exactly smart enough to know this is all I can handle right now. That's cryptic. So, is working 2 jobs and still smiling at strangers in basements? Clara grinned. Touché. She stretched up for a box of light bulbs on the top shelf, her fingers barely grazing it. Darius reached over her, careful not to get too close, and grabbed the box. Thanks. These are for the west corridor. Half the lights up there are... The fluorescent tube directly above them made a sharp pop. Everything happened in less than a second. The tube exploded, raining glass and sparks. Darius's instincts kicked in before thought. He spun, wrapped his arms around Clara, and twisted so his back took the brunt of the falling debris. Glass shattered against his shoulders. Something hot, the burning filament, grazed his left forearm, tearing through the coverall sleeve. Then silence. Darius stood frozen, Clara pressed against his chest, his arms locked around her protectively. He could feel her heart hammering 140 beats per minute now, racing with adrenaline and fear. Are you okay? He asked, his voice rougher than intended. Yes. I think so. Clara pulled back slightly, looking up at him. Are you okay? That glass.
I've fine.
But she was already looking at his arm, where the sleeve had torn. Her eyes widened. Darius followed her gaze and cursed internally. The fabric had ripped away completely, exposing his forearm. And there, visible even in the dim light, were the scars. Silver lines, crossing his skin in patterns that looked almost deliberate. Burn marks, old and faded but unmistakable. The kind of scars that came from something that burned hot enough to mark supernatural flesh permanently. Sunlight. From the one time he'd been careless, in 1847, when he'd stayed too long reading Margaret's letters after dawn. Clara stared at the scars for a long moment. Darius prepared for questions he couldn't answer. How did you get those? Why do they look like that? What are you? But Clara just reached out, her fingers hovering an inch above the marks without touching. That must have hurt once, she whispered. Not that must hurt past tense. Like she understood these were old wounds, ancient pain that had long since stopped burning. Darius couldn't breathe, didn't need to breathe, but forgot how to pretend. Yeah, he managed. Long time ago. Clara's hand dropped. We should probably report that light. Maintenance needs to. She stopped, a small smile crossing her face.
Oh, right.
You are maintenance. I'll handle it. And your arm? That filament was hot. Really? I'm fine. Darius stepped back, putting distance between them before his control slipped further. The way she'd looked at his scars, not with disgust or fear, but with empathy, made him want to tell her everything. I'm not Derek. I'm Darius Vale, the man you covered with your cardigan last night. I'm 300 years old. I watched empires rise and fall. And I think you're the reincarnation of the only woman I ever loved. Instead, he said, you should probably get back to work, before someone notices we're both missing. Clara nodded, but hesitated.
Hey, Derek?
Thanks. For, you know, the shield thing. Instinct. Good instincts. She gathered her cleaning supplies and headed toward the elevator, leaving Darius alone in the flickering darkness. He looked down at his exposed scars, centuries-old reminders of the one time he'd been careless enough to let emotion override survival. Clara had touched them without fear, recognized pain without demanding explanations. Just like Margaret, he thought. But Margaret had known what he was. Clara didn't. Which raised a terrifying question. Was she remembering, or was this just who she'd always been, across lifetimes, across centuries? Someone who saw monsters and chose kindness anyway. Darius pulled out his phone and typed a message to his private investigator. I need a genealogy trace. Thompson family line, going back 200 years. Look for any connection to the name Margaret Whitmore. He hit send and stared at the broken light above him, still sparking in the dark. Something was happening. Something that felt like fate, which he'd stopped believing in around the same time he'd stopped believing in mercy. But Clara Thompson made him want to believe again. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The genealogy report arrived at 3:47 a.m. Darius sat in the Vale Corp archives, a climate-controlled vault 3 floors below ground where the company kept records dating back to its founding in 1891. He'd started the business under a different name then, using wealth accumulated over centuries to build something legitimate in the new world. His private investigator, a former MI6 analyst who specialized in impossible requests and didn't ask questions, had sent a 47-page document. Darius opened it. Subject: Clara Marie Thompson, née Patterson, mother. Elizabeth Patterson, née Whitmore, maternal grandmother. Dorothy Whitmore, née Chin, maternal great-grandmother. Alice Whitmore, née Dover. Darius scrolled faster, his hands steady even as his mind raced. Maternal great-great-great-grandmother. Catherine Whitmore, née Ashford, maternal great-great-great-great-grandmother. Margaret Rose Whitmore, née. He stopped breathing, stopped pretending to breathe. Margaret Rose Whitmore. Born 1802, Yorkshire, England. Married Darius Vale, 1823. Died 1825. There it was. in black and white. Digital ink that confirmed what his dead heart had already known. Clara wasn't just like Margaret. She was Margaret's blood. Direct maternal line, passed down through daughters for 200 years. Darius leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. The report continued. Note: Whitmore family records become sparse after 1892. A fire destroyed the family estate in Sussex. Census records show only one survivor, Catherine Whitmore, age 19, who emigrated to America. She arrived at Ellis Island in 1893 using the name Catherine Ashford, possibly to escape debt or scandal. Trail goes cold for several years before she resurfaces in Boston, 1899, married with a daughter. A fire. Of course there was a fire. Darius pulled up his own private records, journals he'd kept, written in codes only he could decipher. He found the entry from October 1892. The Whitmore estate burned last night. I watched from the hills. Margaret's family, her brother's line gone. I should have protected them. I promised her I would watch over them, but I was in Vienna, attending to business that mattered so much less. Another failure. Another promise broken. He'd attended the funeral in disguise, compelling the local priest to let him view the bodies. 7 dead. But he'd counted carefully. One coffin held only ash and bone fragments, arranged to suggest a body that had never been there. Someone had escaped. Catherine, Margaret's great-great-niece. She'd survived and vanished, erasing her identity, starting over in America with nothing. And now, 133 years later, her descendant cleaned office buildings at midnight and gave away cardigans she couldn't afford to replace.
Why?
Darius thought. Why does the universe bring her back to me now? He had no answer. Only the certainty that this wasn't coincidence. The cosmos didn't work that way, not for creatures like him, who'd cheated death for centuries.
His phone buzzed.
A text from his building security. FYI, suspicious activity reported in residential area near 47th and 9th. NYPD increasing patrols. Darius checked the address against Clara's file. Her building was on 48th and 9th. Clara felt the eyes on her the moment she stepped out of the subway. It was barely 4 p.m. She'd finished her diner shift early because they'd had no customers, and the October sun was already sinking behind the buildings, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. You're being paranoid, she told herself, clutching her purse tighter. Nobody's following you. But the feeling persisted. That crawling sensation between her shoulder blades, like invisible fingers tracing her spine. She'd felt it yesterday, too, when she'd been walking Ethan home from school. And the day before, at the laundromat. Always the same, a presence just out of sight, watching without revealing itself. Clara quickened her pace. Her building was 2 blocks away, a 6-story walk-up with paint peeling like old skin. Not home, just the place she slept between shifts. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her keys already in hand. Ethan would be with Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who watched him after school for $20 a week Clara could barely afford.
Nana.
Ethan burst out of apartment 3B the moment Clara knocked. He was small for 5, with dark curly hair and eyes that saw too much. Look what I found. He held up something small and silver, pinched between his thumb and forefinger. Where did you get that, baby? By our door. It was just sitting there, like someone dropped it. Ethan turned it over in his palm. It's a bat.
Offensiba?
Clara took it from him, and her breath caught. It wasn't just a bat. It was an insignia, a stylized bat with wings spread, crafted from real silver, with tiny rubies for eyes. The detail was incredible, clearly antique. The kind of thing that belonged in a museum, not on the floor of a Bronx apartment building. Ethan, you can't keep this. Someone lost something expensive. But who? Nobody here has stuff like this. He was right. Their building was full of families like theirs, working poor, hanging on by fingernails and prayer. No one owned silver insignias with ruby eyes. Mrs. Chen appeared in her doorway, wiping flour from her hands. Everything okay? Did you see anyone unusual in the hallway today? The old woman frowned,
No.
but she hesitated. This morning, very early, I heard footsteps. Slow, like someone was walking very carefully. I looked through the peephole, but the hallway was empty. A chill ran down Clara's spine. Mama, what's wrong? Ethan tugged her sleeve. Nothing, sweetheart. Go pack your backpack. We need to return this tomorrow. Clara handed Mrs. Chin a $20 bill. Thank you for watching him. Inside their apartment, Clara locked the door, all 3 locks, including the chain, and went to the window. She looked down at the street below, scanning for anything out of place. At first, she saw nothing, just the usual chaos. People heading home from work, a dog walker, a delivery truck. Then she saw him. A man in a long dark coat, standing perfectly still beneath the bodega awning across the street. He was looking up, looking directly at her window. Clara jerked back, her heart racing. When she dared to peek again 5 seconds later, he was gone.
Nana.
Ethan appeared beside her, clutching his stuffed elephant. Are you scared? Yes, she wanted to say. I'm terrified, and I don't know why. Instead, she knelt down and hugged him tight.
No, baby.
Just tired. You're always tired, Ethan said matter-of-factly. Then he pulled back and looked at her with those 2 wise eyes. I had a weird dream last night. Yeah, about a man with red eyes. He said. Ethan scrunched up his face, trying to remember. He said, protect her, I think he meant you. Clara's blood went cold. What did this man look like? Fancy. Like the people on TV. And sad. Really, really sad, Ethan yawned. Can we have mac and cheese for dinner? Sure, baby. But Clara's hands shook as she filled the pot with water. Ethan's dream. The silver bat insignia. The feeling of being watched. The man in the street. And something else. Something she couldn't quite name. A sense of recognition. Like she'd forgotten something important and her subconscious was screaming at her to remember. She looked at the bat insignia sitting on the counter, its ruby eyes catching the light. Who are you? She wondered. And why do I feel like I should know? In the living room, Ethan hummed while playing with his toy cars. The melody was strange, old-fashioned, like something from a different era. Clara had never heard it before. So why did it make her want to cry? 3 blocks away, Darius stood on a rooftop, his coat billowing in the wind. He dropped the insignia on purpose, a test, to see if she'd keep it or try to return it. But watching her window, seeing the fear in her silhouette, he realized he'd made a mistake. Clara didn't need more fear in her life. She needed safety, protection, things he'd failed to give Margaret before she died. I won't fail again, he swore silently. But even as he made the vow, he wondered, was he protecting her? Or was he haunting her, like the ghost he'd become, neither fully dead nor truly alive? The line between the two was thinner than most people knew. The invitation arrived at Clara's apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, slipped under her door in a cream-colored envelope that felt like silk. ValeCorp Staff Appreciation Dinner Saturday, October 19th, 8 p.m. Personal invitation for Clara Thompson Transportation provided. Clara stared at it, confused. She'd worked at ValeCorp for 8 months and had never been invited to anything. The day shift got company picnics and holiday parties, but night crew was invisible, the people who cleaned up after the real employees went home. Is it fancy? Ethan asked, peering over her shoulder. I don't know. There was a phone number at the bottom. Clara called it, expecting HR. Instead, a smooth male voice answered. Miss Thompson, I'm glad you received the invitation. Mr. Vale? Clara's stomach flipped. She'd never actually spoken to the CEO. She'd only seen him once, asleep in his office, looking so exhausted she'd wanted to protect him somehow. I wanted to personally thank the night staff for their dedication. You work while the rest of us sleep, and that deserves recognition. That's very kind. But I don't have anyone to watch my son. Bring him. There's a game room. He'll be well cared for. Clara hesitated. Something felt off about this, but she couldn't pinpoint what. Will others be there? From the night crew. Of course. I've invited everyone. After she hung up, Clara looked at the invitation again. The address was in Westchester, an hour's drive. She'd need to borrow a dress from somewhere. And heels. God, she hadn't worn heels in years. Mama, are you smiling? Ethan asked.
She was.
Despite the strangeness, despite the inconvenience, some part of her was excited. When was the last time someone had invited her to anything that wasn't a PDA meeting or a bill collector's office? This is stupid, she told herself. It's just a work dinner. But she borrowed a black dress from Mrs. Chen anyway. The car that picked them up on Saturday was a Mercedes. The driver, a silent man in a press suit, held the door open like Clara was royalty instead of a janitor who made $14 an hour. Ethan pressed his face against the window the entire drive, watching the city give way to suburbs, then to sprawling estates hidden behind iron gates. Mama, rich people live different, he whispered. Yeah, baby. They do. The Vale Mansion appeared at the end of a tree-lined drive, a stone structure that looked like it had been transplanted from Europe. Gothic windows, ivy climbing the walls, a fountain in the circular driveway that probably cost more than Clara's annual salary. Holy crap, Clara breathed, then covered her mouth. I didn't say that. Ethan giggled. A butler, an actual butler, met them at the door. Ms. Thompson. Young Master Ethan. Please follow me. The interior was exactly what Clara expected. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings that belonged in museums. But it was also strangely cold. Not temperature, the heating worked fine. But there was an emptiness to it, like a beautiful place where no one actually lived. The other guests? Clara asked. The butler's expression didn't change. You're the first to arrive. Mr. Vale is waiting in the dining room. Something twisted in Clara's gut, instinct screaming that this was wrong. But Ethan was already following the butler, and turning around now would be rude, and she needed this job, and... The dining room took her breath away. It was lit entirely by candles, hundreds of them, on the table, in wall sconces, reflecting off mirrors and crystal. The table was set for two. Just two. And at the head of the table sat Darius Vale. He stood when he saw her, and Clara's words died in her throat. He was wearing a black suit that probably cost more than her car, back when she'd had a car. His pale eyes caught the candlelight, making them almost luminous. Ms. Thompson, thank you for coming. Where is everyone else? A pause. Then, I may have been misleading. This dinner is specifically for you. Clara's heart began to race. Why? Because you covered me with your cardigan when you thought I was sleeping. Because you clean my office with more care than most people show their own homes. Because Darius gestured to a chair.
Please. Seek.
Let me at least explain over dinner. The butler had already whisked Ethan away, promising video games and pizza. Clara was alone with her billionaire boss in a candlelit mansion, and every survival instinct told her to run. But she's Saturday. Because part of her, the part that had whispered to a sleeping stranger, the part that had covered him when she had nothing to give, that part was curious. Dinner was served. Courses Clara couldn't pronounce, wine she pretended to sip, conversation that felt like a dance where neither of them knew the steps. You asked why I invited you, Darius said, cutting into something that might have been venison. The truth is, I wanted to understand you. Understand me? You're kind in a world that punishes kindness. You give when you have nothing. He stopped, something flickering across his face. You remind me of someone I lost. Clara set down her fork. Mr. Vale.
Darius.
Please. Darius, the name felt strange on her tongue.
Familiar, Samkau.
I'm just a janitor who tries to be decent. There's nothing to understand. That's where you're wrong. Before Clara could respond, the lights died. Every light in the mansion went out simultaneously, leaving only the candles. Their flames danced wildly, as if responding to something outside. Power grid, Darius said, but his voice had changed. Rougher. Storm must have. Then Clara saw the window. The moon was rising, huge, blood-red, like something from a nightmare. It filled the window frame, bathing everything in crimson light. Darius stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. You need to leave.
Now. What?
Why? Please, the word came out strangled. Clara, I need you to go. But Clara was frozen, staring at him, because in the blood moonlight, she could see his face changing. His eyes were no longer pale gray. They were burning red. His skin had gone corpse white, and when he opened his mouth to speak, she saw them.
Fangs.
Long, sharp, impossible fangs where his canines should be. Clara should have screamed, should have run, should have done anything except what she did. She stood slowly, her legs shaking, and whispered, You look just like him. Darius froze. What? The man in my dreams. The one I keep seeing. Clara's voice trembled. The one with red eyes who keeps saying. She pressed her hands to her temples. God, why can't I remember? Clara. I know you. The words burst from her like a confession. I don't know how I know you, but I do. When I covered you with my cardigan, it felt like I'd done it before. Like I was supposed to. Tears streamed down her face. What's happening to me? What are you? Darius took a step toward her, his hands raised. He'd retracted the fangs, pulled them back through sheer willpower, but his eyes still burned crimson. I'm the monster who loved someone like you once, he said quietly. And I've spent 200 years trying to forget her. Margaret, Clara whispered. Darius's face went slack with shock. How do you know that name? I don't know. Clara backed toward the door, her mind fracturing. I need to get my son. I need to leave. Clara, wait. But she was already running, her borrowed heels clicking against marble, the blood moon following her through every window like an accusation. Behind her, Darius stood alone in the candlelight, watching his past run away from him. Again. Clara didn't remember the car ride home. One moment she was grabbing Ethan from the game room, the next she was locking her apartment door with trembling hands, checking the locks twice, then 3 times. Mama, you're scaring me. Ethan stood in his pajamas, clutching his elephant. What happened? Nothing, baby. I don't feel well. Clara knelt and pulled him into a hug, breathing in the simple comfort of a shampoo, the cheap kind that smelled like artificial strawberries.
Real.
Normal. Let's get you to bed, okay? But after Ethan fell asleep, Clara sat on the couch in the dark, staring at nothing. Red eyes.
Fangs.
I'm the monster who loved someone like you once. It should have been impossible. Vampires weren't real. They were stories, fiction, the kind of thing Ethan watched in cartoons where the monsters were friendly and drank juice boxes instead of blood. Except she'd seen his face change. Seen the hunger and the pain and the recognition in those burning eyes. Margaret, she'd said. Where had that name come from? Clara pulled out her phone and typed the name into Google, fingers shaking. Margaret Whitmore. The search returned genealogy records, census data, a few scattered references. She clicked on one, a digitized marriage record from 1823. Margaret Rose Whitmore married Darius Vale, 14th of June, Yorkshire, England. The phone slipped from Clara's hand. She picked it up with numb fingers and kept reading. Margaret Vale, née Whitmore, died 1825. Cause of death, fever. Survived by husband Darius Vale, whereabouts unknown. 2 years. They'd been married for 2 years before she died. And somehow, Clara had known her name. This is crazy. This is impossible. But she kept searching, falling down a rabbit hole of records and archives, until exhaustion finally dragged her under at 4 a.m. The dream came in fragments, pieces of a life that wasn't hers, but felt more real than memory. She was in a study, lit by oil lamps and a fireplace that crackled with dying embers. Her hands, not her hands, but they moved when she wanted, were ink-stained, holding a quill over parchment. You should rest, the voice came from behind her, smooth and familiar. She turned and saw him. Darius, but different, his hair longer, tied back, his clothes from another century. And his eyes. They were the pale gray she'd seen in his office, before the blood moon turned them red. "So should you," she heard herself say. Her voice was different too, accent refined, British. "You've been working since sunset. I have an empire to maintain. And I have a husband who forgets he's human." She rose from the desk. God, she was wearing a corset, layers of heavy fabric, and crossed to him. Her hands found his face, traced the sharp line of his jaw. "You're cold." "I'm always cold." "Then let me warm you." She pulled him down to her, and when their lips met, she felt something click into place, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. When they pulled apart, Darius rested his forehead against hers. His eyes had changed, burning crimson in the firelight. She didn't flinch. "You're not afraid," he whispered, wonder in his voice. "Of you?" "Never," she smiled. "You gave me peace when I had none. Why would I fear the man who taught me what love actually means?" "Margaret." "Hush," she pressed a finger to his lips. "No one deserves to be this tired."
Call me.
"Sleep beside me. Just for a few hours." "I don't sleep." "Then pretend. For me."
And he did.
He lay beside her in the massive four-poster bed, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her like she was something precious. Like she was worth protecting. Like she was. Clara woke gasping, tears streaming down her face. The dream clung to her, refusing to fade the way dreams usually did. She could still feel the weight of the corset, smell the lamp oil, taste his lips.
No.
Not my memory. Not my life. But it had felt real. More real than this cramped apartment with its water-stained ceiling and neighbors shouting through thin walls.
Nana.
Clara jumped. Ethan stood in her doorway, his face pale. "Baby, what's wrong?" "I had a bad dream." He climbed onto the couch and curled into her lap. Too big for this now, but she held him anyway. The man with the red eyes was there again. Clara's blood went cold. What did he say? He was sad. Really, really sad. And he kept saying, "Protect her." She doesn't remember yet, but she will. Ethan looked up at her with frightened eyes. Mama, who doesn't remember? Remember what? Before Clara could answer, someone knocked on the door. 3 soft knocks, careful and deliberate. Clara's heart stopped. It was 6:47 a.m. No one knocked this early unless something was wrong. She settled Ethan on the couch. "Stay here." "Mama, don't." But she was already at the door, looking through the peephole. Darius Vale stood in her hallway, still wearing his suit from last night, looking like he'd been to hell, and decided to visit her on the way back. Clara opened the door, but kept the chain latched. "How did you find me?" "I've always known where you were," his voice was hollow. "Clara, we need to talk. About the fact that you're a vampire? Or about the fact that I'm apparently the reincarnation of your dead wife?" A pause. "Both." Clara laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "I dreamed about her. About being her. About you." She pressed her hand against the door frame to steady herself. "I remembered things I shouldn't know. Your study. The way you took your tea. The scar on your shoulder from," she stopped. "From a sword fight in 1809. How do I know that?" "Because you were there." Darius's eyes, gray again, human again, filled with something that looked like hope and devastation mixed together. "Because somehow, impossibly, you are her. And I don't understand why the universe gave you back to me when I don't deserve it. I have a son." Clara's voice shook. "I have a life. I'm not her, I'm me." "I know." "Then why are you here?" "Because you're in danger." Darius glanced down the hallway. "There are people, hunters, who track my kind. They've found my trail through this building. Through you. Last night, when I lost control, I left a psychic signature they can follow." "So this is your fault?" "Yes." At least he was honest. Clara looked back at Ethan, who was watching them with those 2 old eyes. then back at Darius, who stood in her hallway like a ghost from a past she shouldn't remember, but did. "Tell me the truth," she whispered. "All of it. Why did Margaret die?" Darius's face crumpled. "Because I loved her too much to turn her. She wanted to stay human, stay pure. So I let her grow old while I stayed frozen. And when the fever took her, I held her hand and watched her slip away, knowing I could save her with a single bite." His voice broke. "I chose her wishes over my own heart. And I've regretted it every day for 200 years. Clara felt tears on her cheeks. "She forgave you. How do you know?" "Because I remember." Clara touched her chest, where the memory sat like a stone. Her last words. She said, "You gave me peace when I had none. That was always enough." Darius's eyes widened. "I never told anyone that. Not in 2 centuries. "I know." Clara's hand moved to the chain lock. "Because I was there." She opened the door. And for the first time since Margaret's death, Darius Vale stepped across the threshold toward the woman he'd loved and lost. The woman who'd somehow, impossibly, come back. They ended up on the Vale Corp rooftop. Clara didn't remember Darius calling his driver or getting Ethan safely to his penthouse with a security detail, but somehow it had happened. Now she stood 45 stories above Manhattan, the wind whipping her hair, the sky bleeding from black to deep purple as dawn approached. "We have maybe 30 minutes before sunrise," Darius said, pacing the rooftop like a caged wolf. "The hunters, they use sunlight as a weapon. Concentrated UV grenades, phosphorus flares. They'll come at dawn when I'm weakest. Then why are we here?" Clara hugged herself against the cold. "Why not hide somewhere dark?" "Because I needed you to see." Darius stopped at the edge, gesturing to the city spreading below them in a carpet of lights. "I built this. All of it. Vale Corp, the hospitals it funds, the schools, the shelters. For 200 years, I've tried to make the world better because I couldn't save the one person who mattered. Margaret. You." He turned to face her. "You were always you, Clara. Margaret was just another version, another life. But the soul underneath, the kindness, the strength, the way you see good in broken things, that's always been the same." Clara's throat tightened. "I don't know how to be what you need. I don't need you to be anything except safe." Darius pulled an envelope from his jacket. "There's a house in Oregon. Paid off, under your name. 50,000 in an account for Ethan's education. Documents for new identities. You leave tonight, and the hunters will lose your trail. What about you? I'll lead them away. Make them think you were just collateral damage, by letting them kill you." Darius smiled, but it was sad. "I've been tired for a very long time, Clara. Maybe it's time to rest." "No," the word came out sharp. "You don't get to do that. I'm offering you freedom. You're offering me guilt." Clara's voice rose. "You think I want to spend the rest of my life knowing you died, so I could run? Knowing that some part of me, Margaret or whoever I was, loved you enough to find you again across centuries, and I just left. You have a son who dreams about you, who somehow knows you're important." Clara stepped closer, her hands balled into fists. "I don't understand this. Any of this. But I know what it feels like when you're near me, like I can finally breathe after holding my breath my entire life. Like I've been searching for something I lost and didn't know I was looking for." Darius stared at her. "Clara, Margaret told you I forgave you. Well, I'm telling you now, I'm tired of running." Clara's voice cracked. "My whole life I've run. From grief, from poverty, from every hard thing that came my way. But I'm done. If hunters are coming, then we face them together, or not at all. You could die. Everyone dies, Darius. But not everyone gets a second chance to fight for something that matters." Before Darius could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face went white. "They're here. In the building. They must have tracked your scent from my mansion." "How many?" 4 signatures. "Professional team." He moved to the rooftop access door and sealed it with a heavy lock. "That'll buy us 5 minutes. What do we do?" You hide behind the ventilation unit. When they breach, I draw them away, and you run for the fire stairs on the north side. An explosion shook the building. The rooftop access door blew inward, metal shrieking as it tore from its hinges. Smoke poured through the opening, and figures emerged, for people in tactical gear, faces hidden behind masks, carrying weapons that glowed with an eerie blue light. Darius Vale, the lead hunter's voice was distorted by a vocoder. By order of the Covenant, you're sentenced to final death for crimes against humanity.
Ibe kummita no krimas.
You exist. That's crime enough. The hunter raised a cylindrical device. Clara recognized it from action movies. A grenade. Say goodbye to your pet human. Everything happened at once. Darius moved faster than Clara's eyes could follow, putting himself between her and the hunters. The grenade detonated midair, and instead of fire or shrapnel, it released a blinding white light. Pure, concentrated sunlight. Darius screamed. The light engulfed him, and Clara watched in horror as his skin began to smoke, silver burns spreading across his hands and face. He collapsed to his knees, still trying to shield her with his body.
No. Clara didn't think.
She tore off her cardigan, the same threadbare beige one she'd worn that first night, and threw it over Darius's head and shoulders, trying to block the UV light. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. But she knelt beside him anyway, covering him with her body, whispering the only words that mattered. No one deserves to be this tired. Stay with me. Please. Darius's hand found hers, his grip weak. When he looked up at her, his eyes were streaming, not tears, but blood. Crimson tracks ran down his cheeks, glowing faintly in the pre-dawn light. Blood tears. The rarest vampire phenomenon, triggered only by soul recognition. It's really you, he breathed. My queen. My Margaret. My Clara. The hunters had stopped advancing, staring at the blood tears. Impossible, one whispered. Blood tears mean true love, another finished. The kind that transcends death. The lead hunter lowered her weapon slowly. We hunt monsters. Not. She gestured helplessly at Clara and Darius, huddled together on the rooftop. Not this. Please, Clara begged, still covering Darius. He's not a monster. He's just tired. He's been tired for so long. The eastern horizon was turning gold. Sunrise was minutes away. The lead hunter made a decision. She pulled a black cloth from her belt and tossed it to Clara. UV-blocking fabric. Get him inside. If we report this, others will come. So we won't report it, she looked at her team. Agreed. They nodded. You have 1 minute before the sun clears the buildings. I suggest you move. Clara didn't waste time on thank yous. She wrapped the UV fabric around Darius and helped him stand, his weight heavy against her. Together, they stumbled toward the stairs as the first rays of sunlight kissed the rooftop behind them. In the stairwell, safe in the darkness, Darius collapsed against the wall. The blood tears had dried on his face, leaving faint marks like war paint. You stayed, he whispered. Of course I stayed. You idiot, Clara was crying now, shaking with adrenaline and relief. What part of we face this together did you not understand? The part where you risk your life for a monster. You're not a monster. You're just a man who's been alone too long. Clara cupped his burned face gently. But you're not alone anymore. Understand? Darius pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. His body shook, not from pain, but from the weight of 2 centuries of loneliness finally lifting. I understand, he breathed. And for the first time since Margaret's death, he let himself hope that rest, real rest, might finally be possible. The cafe smelled like coffee and cinnamon rolls. Clara wiped down the counter for the 3rd time, even though it was already spotless. Nervous habit. She'd opened Sunrise Cafe a week ago in a small coastal town 3 hours north of the city, a place where nobody knew her name and nobody asked questions about the sudden career change or the mysterious benefactor who'd funded everything. Through the window, she could see Ethan on the beach, collecting shells with the kind of carefree joy she'd thought he'd lost forever. Here, there were no gunshots at night. No broken locks. No fear. Just the endless rhythm of waves and the cry of seagulls. The bell above the door chimed. Clara looked up with her practiced smile. Welcome to sunrise. The words died in her throat. Darius Vale stood in the doorway, backlit by the setting sun. He wore jeans and a simple black sweater, so different from his tailored suits that it took her a moment to recognize him. His face had healed completely, no trace of the silver burns that had marked him on that rooftop. But something else had changed. His eyes were warm, almost human. Is it too late for coffee? His voice was soft, uncertain, like he was afraid she might tell him to leave. Clara's hands trembled. She'd thought about this moment every day for a week. Wondered if he'd come. Hoped he would. Feared he wouldn't. We're open until 9, she managed. Darius approached the counter slowly, as if crossing a great distance rather than just a few feet. Black coffee. Please. Clara poured it with hands that wouldn't stay steady. When she set the cup down, their fingers brushed, skin to skin, warm to warm. You're not cold anymore, she whispered. No, Darius wrapped both hands around the mug, staring into it like it held answers. I'm not a lot of things anymore. What do you mean? He looked up, and his eyes, those pale gray eyes she'd first seen in his office, were filled with wonder. I haven't fed in a week. The hunger, it's gone. Completely gone. He took a sip of coffee and smiled. This is the first thing I've tasted in 300 years that didn't taste like ash. Clara's breath caught. How? You, Darius set down the cup. Your blood tears on the rooftop, they weren't just tears. They were proof of soul recognition. When you covered me, when you stayed even though you could have run, he shook his head. Something in me broke. Or healed. I'm not sure which. But the curse lifted. I woke up the next evening and realized I could walk in sunlight. You can. Not full daylight yet. But dusk, dawn. I watched the sunset tonight for the first time since 1723, and his voice cracked. It was beautiful. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Darius. I tracked your scent here. I hope that's not creepy, he smiled, a real smile, boyish and uncertain. I needed to see you, to make sure you were safe. And happy, he glanced out the window at Ethan. He looks good. Lighter. We both are. Clara came around the counter, unable to stay away anymore. But we've been missing something. What? You. Darius stood slowly, his coffee forgotten. Clara, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. Actual warmth, human warmth. Ethan asks about you every day. He says the man in his dreams is lonely. And she touched his face, traced the line of his jaw the way Margaret had in her dream memory. I remember more. Every night, pieces come back. Our life together. The way you'd read to me in your study. How you'd pretend to sleep beside me even though you didn't need to, just so I wouldn't feel alone. Margaret loved those moments. I love those moments, Clara's voice was firm. I'm not just Margaret, and I'm not just Clara. I'm both. I'm all the versions of this soul that kept finding its way back to you. And I'm tired of fighting it. You deserve a normal life. I deserve a life with someone who sees me, who's seen me across centuries, who loves me enough to let me go and chase me enough to hope I'll stay. She smiled through her tears. You think that's normal? Darius pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers the way he had in that centuries-old dream. I don't know how to be human anymore. Then learn. We'll figure it out together. Clara's hands found his. But first, you need to do something you haven't done in 300 years. What's that? Rest. She led him to the corner booth by the window, the one with a view of the beach and the endless ocean beyond. Darius slid into the seat, and Clara sat across from him, her hands wrapped around his across the worn table. This time, Darius said softly, I just wanted to see you awake. Clara smiled, the kind of smile that held lifetimes of love and loss and finding each other again. Then stay a while. You've been tired long enough. Through the window, the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Ethan looked up from his shell collection and waved. Clara waved back. And Darius, the vampire king who'd ruled in shadow for 3 centuries, who'd built empires and watched them fall, who'd loved and lost and somehow been given the rarest gift of all, finally closed his eyes. Not in death. Not in pretense.
But in peace.
Real, honest human peace. Outside, the waves kept their endless rhythm. Inside, the coffee stayed warm. And for the first time in 300 years, Darius Vale truly rested. Because he wasn't alone anymore. And he never would be again.